All right. Well, good morning. Good morning. We have made it to day 3 of the Adult Reentry Grant Program Rental Assistance Cohort 2 Grantee Orientation. And I was able to update my slides so I no longer have you confused with one handoff. But we are here. It is day 3. I am excited to get you all through here. And we will go ahead and get started for this morning. Maybe. There we go. All right, so welcome back. We'll start, the agenda before you tells us what we're going to cover today. We'll have our final 2 projects speaking, or they'll present today. We're going to hear from some of the analysts. They're going to talk about your fiscal responsibilities, and you'll hear me talk to you about budget modifications within that. And then we'll also talk about some data collection, and I'll share some of that information with you. And then the analysts will discuss your progress reports and give you a detailed overview of what your progress reports look like and how to utilize them and things like that. So housekeeping before we start, of course, it looks like everybody's name is on there properly. So thank you for that. Remember, mute. You guys have been doing a great job with that. Thank you. Thank you. Cameras on. I've seen a few more over the last day or so. So thank you. Please remember to keep your cameras on so we can continue to engage. And remember, there are no breaks. So take care of yourself as you need to. Get your water or use the bathroom or coffee, whatever you need to get. Make sure you're taking good care of yourself. We'll start with our staff. We'll let our staff welcome you, especially if there are any who have not been here the last couple of days or who may have missed. We'll start with Veronica. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 3rd and final day.
Thank you, Veronica. Adriana.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Let's get this done. Glad to see you guys here.
Awesome. Let's see, Danielle.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Day 3, we're almost finished.
Almost done. Awesome. Rosa, are you on this morning?
I'm on. Good morning, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Rosa. Ashley Garibaldi is our research data specialist. She is not on with us today, and it's me, Tanya Hill. I am your field rep. All right, we have our first presenter, or our first grantee presenter today, and that is going to be Men of Valor. Woo! Men of Valor, are you on?
Yes, we are on.
All right.
Yep. How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
All right. My name is Joseph Cotton Jr., and I'm the executive director for Men of Valor. Men of Valor been around for 30 years, working with men coming out of incarceration. Our program is to strive to get the men employed, to have reconnection with their families, and to give them a solid foundation so that they can have a place to get themselves together and to get educated if need be, to get their license, get Social Security cards, things that they'll need to be equipped to have a successful reentry back into society. Once again, like I said, we've been around for 30 years. Our facility, I believe we're probably one of the largest programs that have the most bedding. We can house up to 100 men in our program. We currently have about 52 men in our living facility, as well as we're part of the FUBU program, and we have another 20 or so men on that program. And so Men of Valor is just striving to help change lives one life at a time. Our object is to try to fulfill all the needs that the men need to get themselves together. And then the most important thing is to get housing, stable housing, which is very important, because if a man don't have a place to go and he's looking at homelessness, he's gonna go back to the things that he know to do, and that's recidivism, and that's what we're trying to avoid. And so it's very important for this housing grant to help the men with trying to find permanent housing. But in the meanwhile, Men of Valor is capable of housing them, and we could house them up to 6 months to 18 months, which is a good thing because it gives them some stability until they can get on their feet and live on their own. And I think that's pretty much it. And we have a lot of other things that we include in that, which is education, GED. We have a computer classroom where men can learn how to work on the computers, get their resumes together. We're pretty successful with finding men jobs. We have a lot of companies that call us and look for men. We have a company now at the Oakland airport, not Oakland airport, but at the Port of Oakland that need 50 men. And so a lot of our men are currently working there, which is a great job, and it's a union job. And so all of these things just help Men of Valor to strive to really help the men to be successful once they're released. And then the main goal is to graduate and to be reunified with their families. And I think that's a good summary of Men of Valor.
Thank you so much, Pastor Cotton. I appreciate you sharing all about your program and your project. I will say, I know Men of Valor started with us in 2019 as a warm handoff and was extended, as all of you were, to become now double winners. So congratulations twice. And yes. And good luck on all of the wonderful things you'll be able to do by being able to expand to include rental into the services that you were already offering. So looking forward to seeing some more good stuff coming out of your program. I will say, I noticed in the chat that Jim McGrath was asking where Men of Valor is located.
Oh, Men of Valor is located in Oakland, California. 6118 International Boulevard, Oakland, California.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Pastor Cotton.
Right.
All right, you guys, let's get it going. So first up today, we're going to start in with your fiscal responsibilities. So Adriana Regalado will share with you all that you need to know about your fiscal responsibilities. So I am going to stop sharing so she can start.
Good morning, everyone. You should now be able to see my fiscal responsibilities presentation.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you. Okay, so again, welcome to the fiscal responsibilities presentation today. In today's presentation, we're going to discuss how to locate and save the invoice workbook, instructions for submitting financial invoices, the desk review process, instructions for submitting line item detail change request and or budget modifications, instructions for requesting an advance payment. The documents referenced will be in the virtual binder packet that you will be receiving within the next week. Those will be the PowerPoint slides, the ARG sample invoice, eligible and ineligible project expenditures, instructions for invoice supporting documentation checklist, the salaries and benefits worksheet, desk review sample email for budget modification and line item change, budget modification form, and finally, the advance payment request form. Let's talk about the invoice workbook. The invoice workbook is an Excel file arranged by worksheets that will be necessary throughout your grant, such as the advance payments, financial invoices, budget modifications, your budget narrative, the due dates, and instructions. We will get into further detail about each one of these throughout the presentation. How to locate the invoice workbook. You will go to the BSCC website and select grants. Once you've selected grants, it will take you to the CPGP page. In the CPGP page, you will locate the quick links on the right-hand side. You will click Grantee Invoicing. Once you've selected Grantee Invoicing, you will be brought to this page where you will find the Cohort 2 rental assistance. Click on the expand icon here. That will then take you to your file. Locate your file and right-click on the file and select Save Link As. Save the workbook to your local computer. Do not rename your file. Exit the web browser and work directly from the saved file. It is important that you guys know that prior to each reporting period, download and save the updated workbook that is on the BSCC website, as that will be the up-to-date workbook. Your invoice is password protected and contains formulas. Therefore, each time the user opens the workbook, they will be prompted to enter a password. The password is the grant agreement number located on your contract. For example, 401-20. Please do not enter the BSCC part of the contract number. In most cases, Excel will prompt the user to enable macros. When this prompt appears, enable editing, enable content. And then enabling these options will allow you to enter the information into your invoices. Forms included in the invoice, again, are the advance payment invoices. This form is used to request your advance payment once you have expended 80% of your total disbursed funds. The financial invoices form that grantees must submit for expenditures incurred each quarter of the grant cycle, regardless of whether or not grants were used or requested. The grantee must expend funds before claiming an expenditure on the invoice. Budget modification form that you will be submitting when you have received pre-approval from your field rep to either submit a line item change, a budget modification, or that form is also used for project income allocation. A copy of your project budget narrative is also located at the end of your invoice workbook and should be referred to when preparing financial invoices. There's also a schedule of invoice reporting periods and due dates. And finally, the invoice workbook instructions. Remembering where to locate these tabs is important, as you will be needing to use them in an exercise that we will have shortly. This here is a financial invoice workbook, financial invoice. The financial invoice is a statement of expenditures. This is where you will be entering your expenditures in alignment to your budget narrative. The financial invoice does not issue payment, and the grantees must submit their financial invoice to the BSCC on a quarterly basis. How to complete a financial invoice. Confirm the reporting period pertains to the dates, that's the reporting period here, of the expenditures that you will be submitting. In the section titled Reporting Period, this reporting period here is where you will enter all the expenditures that you incurred for the line items to the left, salaries and benefits, services and supplies, and so on. The number here should be, the final line item total should be rounded to the nearest whole dollar. This amount should also be the same number that is on your supporting document checklist that we'll be discussing in a minute. As Tanya mentioned on Monday, earned interest from grant funds is project income and must be reported in your financial invoice. That is this here. For more information on project income, that can be located on page 59 of your grant guide. If you go ahead and see this message populating, it is because you have entered an amount that is greater than the available balance. So here's your budget balance. And if you're entering some number here that exceeds this number or the current balance that you'll see in another slide, it is because your number needs to be revised or a budget modification will be necessary. Here's where you will enter your expenditure descriptions. For each dollar amount entered as an expenditure, enter a brief description in this corresponding expenditure description cell. In the comments section, please go ahead and utilize that when you have received pre-approval or are submitting a justification. If you have received pre-approval from a field representative, please go ahead and enter on there any information such as email sent to field rep, approved, and then the date. If something is different from your typical expenditure, but still in your narrative, please go ahead and utilize the comments area to just go ahead and elaborate on that item. Referring to your budget narrative. Again, I completely encourage you to utilize your narrative as you guys are reviewing your invoices. When completing your invoice, refer to your budget narrative to confirm that the expenditures that you are submitting for reimbursement are allocated in your budget and that your expenses are in the correct line item. We encourage you to utilize the new window option, which is here under the view option, which will then go ahead and populate the narrative in a separate window so you can compare side by side to your invoice. When I mentioned the line items, sometimes we have issues where services can be considered under services and supplies or other. So please go ahead and again, refer to your narrative to see where it is you have allocated those funds. How to approve and certify invoices. Here, the person preparing the report section will go ahead and complete the invoices, provide their contact information and the date. If the invoice is revised, please update this date here. Once the invoice is prepared, the individual will forward the invoice workbook to the authorized financial officer to review for approval and certification. Excuse me. So here we have the authorized financial officer. They will enter their information once they have gone ahead and reviewed the invoice. They will enter their contact information, the date, and certify. Once they have hit certify, they can go ahead and utilize the submit option. We do encourage again for the submit option to be utilized. Once the invoice is approved and the certified, so the submit option will go ahead and generate an email. Once you have submitted your invoice, the submission will send the authorized financial officer a email of confirmation, and that invoice workbook will be sent directly to the adult reentry grant email. We are also aware that some Mac users tend to encounter difficulties utilizing the submit option. If you do encounter this issue, the authorized financial officer may submit their invoice via email, letting the ARG know that they are letting us know that you are having technical issues with the submit option. Within that verbiage on your email, please also say that you are certifying the invoice. We will now take any questions that you may have. Again, we will go and continue discussing the other forms. This was just the invoice section. Does anybody have any questions?
There are no questions in the chat. Oh, Kim Carter says yes. Would you like to ask your question, Kim?
Hello, yes, I'd like to ask my question. So I noticed that you had a lot of options for budget modifications, but what I wanted to know is, just in a nutshell, if say I had allocated a person for $1,000 a month for like 3 months or 3,000, but they got the place for $950. So that $150 over 3 months accumulated in that line item. Could I use that for another rental assistance, or would I have to request a budget modification to move that 150 to another rental assistance?
You want me to take that, Adrienne, or you want to
yes,
take that?
please. Go ahead.
We are gonna cover budget modifications in greater detail coming up in maybe I think the next section, no, 2 sections from now, I think. So that will come. Can you hold that question till then? Because we'll probably answer it.
So it is about a budget modification. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Possibly, it may not need to be. If it's specifically for a, if it's all for that rental assistance line item, detail line,
Yeah.
and you allocated so much for X amount of participants, it can remain in that pot and you can just use it, within that pot of money.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
And Kim, if I can add to that, because I did mention justifications and information to enter into your comments area, that information kind of is more what we have seen to be a project that has taken a position that was not necessarily not available, but used at the beginning. And so all of a sudden this position goes ahead and gets filled. And rather than 20 hours for that quarter, they ended up doing 40 hours. And we go ahead and review that the past few quarters, that position hasn't had any payroll fees for that. Then on the justification or the comment, we can put, the grantee is encouraged to go ahead and use that and kind of utilize that to elaborate the fact that, that position was started late, but you're not exceeding the funds that were allocated for that position.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, I hope you guys are ready. So now that we have presented the invoice workbook, your organization will be placed in breakout rooms to complete the invoice exercise that I mentioned. The link is posted in the chat now and will take you to the sample invoice workbook. The link is here as well. And the sample invoice workbook that you will be using for this exercise is password protected, as all invoice workbooks will be. In this case, we are using 401-20. Each group has been given an invoice number to determine if their invoice has any issues. Select someone in your organization to share your screen to complete the exercise. Your group will be given 15 minutes to complete the exercise. At the end of the exercise, select a speaker to share your group's findings with everyone in the orientation. Don't forget to utilize your budget narrative and open the narrative tab in a new window to compare to your invoice. So again, as I mentioned, everybody does have their own invoice. Please go ahead and select the invoice tab that pertains to your group. Arsola has invoice number 1. Brilliant Corners, invoice number 2. Family Assistance, invoice number 3. Homeboy Industries, invoice number 4. Life Moves, invoice 5. Men of Valor, invoice 6. St. John's, invoice 7. Time for Change, invoice 8. The Catalyst Foundation, invoice number 9. So what I'm going to do here is, again, the password is 401-20. Do not forget that these invoices are in tabs. Please select the tab that goes ahead and sends you to your invoice. And I will also go ahead and show you guys the web page to get you guys to the right place. That link will take you to the grantee invoicing that you saw a slide for, which then you will go ahead and do cohort 2, rental assistance. It's already expanded. The ARG sample invoice is located here. Please click here and go ahead and do your exercise. See
time, but the overall intention of the exercise, we wanted to give you a chance to practice looking at the invoices, right? One of the things that we find is the biggest issue we have with invoices, and the reason we do all this back and forth, is because our grantees are putting stuff in the invoice that isn't in the budget narrative. And that's why Adriana was saying to make sure that when you're preparing your invoice, that you're always comparing your budget narrative, what you proposed, to what you're documenting in your invoice. And if by any chance you have stuff in your invoice that's not in your narrative, then you need to reach out to me so that we can identify if we need a budget mod, if it's something that you just need a one-time approval for that we can do with an email, if we need to do a line item. So we need to be able to look at those things. And all we were hoping to do is give you a chance to kind of look at, these are the things that we look at. Can you pick out why we wouldn't approve this or why we would approve this? And give you a chance to kind of play with that information so you would see both sides of that coin. When you start doing your own invoices, you'll be better prepared to do so. So that was the intention. That's what we were hoping to do. If you feel so inclined and you later like keep that link and you want to go into the chat, you want to go into the link on your own and just get a quick look at it, feel free. You can always message us later, email us, tell us what you thought. If you are able to get into that later at a different time, that's all fine. So sorry we weren't able to get it all the way through for you, but we did what we could and we tried it. So we'll keep it going, we'll keep it rolling, and I'll let Adriana take it back over and get to the next part.
Thank you, Tanya. Actually, I did want to go ahead because Men of Valor did spend some time on there. I did want to go ahead and review the invoice. So this is the invoice workbook that you guys had opened. We had scenarios for each one of you guys. Our SOLAs was the salary and benefits area. Here we have the detailed information. Great, awesome information is indicating, you know, the one FTE at $8,000 a month plus benefits equals $8,050. Once we break all this down, it will equal the $9,075. The issue here, once we compare it with the budget narrative, which is what Veronica is going to be doing as she's receiving your guys' invoices and desk reviews, is that once we review the narrative, it will go ahead and indicate that the case manager wages exceeds what you guys have allocated. In the narrative, this amount should not exceed $3,986 for the month. As well as a lead manager is not a position that's allocated for in that narrative, nor is the program coordinator. Now, it could be a matter of a lead manager is how you guys are identifying the position within your agency, but not how they are identified in your narrative. And that is what we're comparing your narrative to. So that was the case on invoice number 1. On invoice number 2, we have, again, legal services, $400 for 5 clients. Everything looks great. However, when I look at the narrative, services and supplies does not have any allocation funds for legal services. And if the $50 gift cards were part of your budget narrative, we here do not have, this is where we go ahead and encourage you to use your comments area here to go ahead and identify the fact that the gift cards were pre-approved by Tanya in an email on January 20th, 2020. So that was the issue with services and supplies. On invoice,
Adriana,
yes.
excuse me, can you pull up one of the narratives and just show where it wouldn't have matched?
Of course. So here, again, this is what we're going ahead and utilizing. As you can see, a lead manager was not on this position. We are going ahead and looking at the funds that were for the case manager to go ahead and calculate how much they should be getting paid on a quarterly basis. Services and supplies does not have anything in their narrative indicating legal services. Although they do have other support, client support, and they're clearly indicating incentives on here, we still need that pre-approval that Tanya has mentioned.
Thank you.
Adriana, quick question.
Of course.
What happens if, like, in my budget I budgeted 2 housing advocates, but since when we're about to submit the budget, we were thinking, okay, they're going to get paid $10 an hour. But when we hired them, then they're like, well, we didn't pay them 10. We went ahead with 15 because they are come with a lot of experience. Do we have to do? I mean, they still two housing advocates, but obviously they're going to be making more money. Do I send a budget modification request, or do I just get an approval by email? How do we do it? I mean, it's going to be, I'm not going to charge more than, let's say I budgeted 2 case managers or whatever, housing advocates for 100,000. So I'm not going to charge to the contract more than 100,000, but I'm going to pay them more. Do I have to do a budget modification?
So Elisa, I love that question because it is very common. But just so for the purpose of the presentation, if you can hold that question for when Tanya goes ahead and does the modifications, that way we can tie in everybody's scenarios with the response.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you also. Okay. Invoice number 4 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, sorry. Legal assistance for one client. I'm sorry, now I'm thrown off. NGOs. So the expense exceeds the allocated funds for the grant period per client allocated. So in this case, if we go to their narrative, they do have legal assistance, but they indicated that they were only going to go ahead and use $200 per participant. So again, that exceeds what they have allocated for that program or for that cost. Same thing here, HP laptop for case manager, $498, an all-in-one printer. In that case, the expenses exceed the allocated funds for the laptop, and a vehicle purchase was not allocated, excuse me, and the all-in-one printer was not allocated in their narrative. So that's just to give you guys kind of a clear idea of what it is that we see coming through. Looking at it, it is looking like what we're asking you. We're asking you for clear information that's providing us how you guys got to this total of $6,186. But then once we compare it to the narrative, the information is not acceptable. In one of the other assignments, somebody did go ahead and report project income earned. And again, this is an important item here that you guys will be reporting. And this was left blank. So in this case, the true scenario would be for there to be an expenditure description. In here, we are writing interest earned on grant advance payments at Wells Fargo, and then the amount. And then the supporting documentation will go ahead and support that, because you guys will submit either a statement that just shows that area that we're looking at of income or interest earned on that amount. On the indirect cost, please make sure that anytime that you guys are revising or confirming your indirect cost, if you have selected the 10%, that is only 10% of salaries and benefits. If you have selected the 5%, that is 5% of all of this information, all of these numbers, except equipment costs. And then make sure that the amount is correct, that it is a 5% or the 10%. In this case, we had the scenario that was exceeding a percentage. Okay, I will go on and move on to the next part of my presentation. Let's go. Now that we have covered invoices, let's move on to
Can I ask a question on the invoice?
Of course.
Okay. On the indirect costs, you only could do, like, if we select salaries, 5%, not the salaries, the total budget, less the equipment. Mm-hmm. Do we do 5% of the total invoice amount for the expenditures that we're reporting on that particular invoice?
Thank you for that question, Jennifer. Yes, the percentage is attributed to what you guys are reporting that quarter. So it's 10% of that quarter for salaries and benefits, 5% of your reporting of expenditures for that quarter.
Okay.
Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to go ahead and again move on over to desk reviews. The desk review is an assessment of the fiscal components of a grant project funded by the SEC process. Fiscal desk reviews are completed by program analysts. The analyst reviews the supporting documentation, as you can see here, that is submitted as part of the desk review for expenditures submitted in your financial invoice. How to locate the source backup documentation and that are required for the desk reviews. You guys actually did go to this site here where you guys found the invoices. Once you guys go ahead and expand this icon is where you guys will find this source and backup documentation required for your desk reviews. We have a link for the instructions, as well as these two documents that will be part of your desk review packet. It's the ARG invoice supporting documentation checklist and the salaries and benefits worksheet. The desk review process. So you will be compiling and supporting the document and, compiling the supporting documentation packet and completing the financial invoice. These are two different processes and both must be done. Compile the following documents: the supporting documentation checklist that we just showed you the link to, the salaries and benefits worksheet, and the supporting documentation for expenditures claimed in the line item order listed on the checklist. So this here is the order that we are talking about. Scan all documents to create a single PDF document. Save the file with your grantee name, your invoice number, and your contract number, Attach and email the documents. The authorized financial officer will email is the only person who can email these documents into the BSEC, and they will send it to the adult reentry grant email. Again, in the email, do use the subject line, your grantee name, supporting documents invoice number, and the contract number. Here is the image of the grantee invoice supporting documentation checklist. Complete the checklist. The checklist is the required face page for submitting the supporting documentation packet. Again, you're seeing here the line items that we will discuss or mention throughout the presentation. This is the grant funds. That should also be what are the numbers that are entered into your invoice. The attached documents, it is telling you it's telling us, the analyst, how it is we're going to find the documents that pertain to this NGO expenses. It must be signed and dated by the authorized financial officer. Ensure all the supporting documents are accurately labeled and matched to the amounts listed on this checklist. Again, when you guys are compiling your supporting documentation, please make sure that you guys are only submitting the documents that pertain to this quarter's expenses. When there are such things as expenses for training, please go ahead and either submit the supporting documentation for the payment that you are providing, not necessarily everything throughout the training. That should be kept with your guys's information for the field rep to review during a site visit. The salaries and benefits worksheet. You must complete the salaries and benefits worksheet as well to be for part of the desk review packet. The authorized financial officer must sign the salaries and benefits worksheet to certify the information is true and correct. Do not submit timesheets with your desk review packet. All timesheets and supporting documents, including time studies, must be maintained on the project site and available to BSEC staff upon request. So this is the area here where we are having the authorized financial officer basically certify that the information is true and correct. Again, this information here, please make sure that when you guys are entering your staff positions and this information here, that it is being, information that is in your narrative. Traditionally, these forms do require a wet signature. However, given the current situation, we are also accepting digital signatures until further notice. Supporting documentation preparation. Include all sufficient supporting documentation to clearly and accurately substantiate each amount that you're claiming on this invoice. Ensure each item and dollar amount is listed on the financial invoice is also listed on the checklist. Label all documents submitted with the budget, line item, and document number, as you can see here in this sample. Highlight or circle documents labels and claimed amounts. Only expenses that are incurred and paid for by the grantee during the grant cycle and before the end of the date and before the end date of the applicable invoicing period are eligible. Ensure that supporting documents easily correlate to the supporting documentation checklist and the line items on the invoice. Examples of supporting documentations are receipts, invoices, work orders, and field representative approvals. The document number refers to the document submitted for each expenditure submitted. So if we have a 4-page invoice, that should all be document number 2 because that refers to that expenditure that you are submitting, that number. And again, we remind you only submit documents that support the expenditures that are being submitted on the invoice. Just to emphasize the previous slide, do highlight, circle the items to make them easily identifiable. The items that should be standing out to us are the vendor name, the form of payment, amount of item or service, the totals paid, date of purchase, and the description of items. If there are multiple documents submitted, please go ahead and include a cover sheet for each section. Section being the salaries and benefits, services and supplies, NGO, other, to go ahead and separate them from the other documents. What does a successful desk review packet look like? Here we have, again, the supporting documentation checklist, the salaries and benefits worksheet, and a clearly labeled, identified, highlighted supporting document. At that point, once you have identified your packet to contain all the information that we do require within the desk review packet, we are going ahead and having the authorized financial officer go ahead and submit the packet on over to the SEC. Again, we request that this packet be one PDF attachment, that it is labeled with your name, with the grantee name, the invoice number, and your contract number. You may submit your email with the invoice if you are encountering that the submit option is not accessible to you. Again, we do remind you to use the subject line so that we can clearly identify the purpose of that email. And the authorized financial officer is the only authorized individual to submit an invoice to the SEC. Maintaining supporting documentation. Grantees must maintain supporting documentation for all grant expenditures claimed on invoices. All supporting documentation must be maintained by the grantee on site and be readily available for review during the SEC site visits. Examples of supporting documentation, again, are the receipts, invoices, work orders, field representative approvals, etc. All grant records must be retained for 3 years from the end of the state award period. Okay, we're opening the floor up for any questions that you may have regarding the desk review.
There's nothing in the chat.
I have a question.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's possible, but the reviewer of the invoices, is it possible to have one person as opposed to a different person in each invoice we send in? You know, the analyst, the reviews, the invoice.
You lost me with analyst. So is there any way that the person preparing the report?
No, I'm sorry. The person on your end, the reviewer of the invoice, the package that we sent in, typically speaking, you know, you may have one analyst this time for invoice 1 and 2, and they like it a certain way. Come invoice 4 and 5, you get a different person reviewing your package, and they like it another way. Through it may not be possible, but it'd be nice if we're dealing with, one person.
I'll take that, Adriana. Hi, Eric. One of the
Hi.
things that happened when we started the grant, as you know, as you can see, we've been bringing on more and more support because it was just Veronica. And as you know, this grant is huge.
Right.
And so we were just trying to be able to keep everything moving. And so we had people helping us just to help us make sure things didn't get bottlenecked. But now we do have Adriana, Veronica, and Danielle. And for your project, your primary analyst will be Veronica.
Okay. All right.
Yes. And so, yes, to answer your question, yes, that is the goal. That is the idea, that you will focus with just one analyst primarily.
Okay, great. Thank
Good
you.
question. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries. Any other questions? Okay. I do just want to throw out for the desk reviews to go ahead and basically always confirm and refer to your narrative because it is part of what, funds that were allocated for each item that you guys will be expending on. And then again, when you guys are done doing your packet, make sure that your authorized financial officer can identify what you are reporting on their invoice so that when they are going ahead and certifying that invoice and signing off to the salaries and benefits worksheet and so on, all of that information is also something that they feel comfortable certifying, and therefore will also make sense to us here at the SEC. Again, that's just a suggestion.
Hey, Adriana, can I jump in here for a second and just kind of piggyback or touch back on a point in your presentation? You had mentioned due to COVID, we're doing, we're accepting electronic signatures at this time when it comes to your supporting documentation. I just wanted to throw out there and let everyone know that currently on the web, the checklist is in a Word format and the salaries and benefits worksheet is in Excel format. So you may need to PDF the document to drop in your electronic signature. So that was all I wanted to touch on.
Thank you, Veronica. That is actually good information. Okay, we're going to go on and move on to budget modifications, and I will stop sharing. Tanya's going to go ahead and discuss that for the next few slides.
Thank you, Adriana. Let me pull that up. And share. All right, budget modification seems to be the question of the day. So let's talk budget mods. There are two ways to make changes to your budget. One is to do a line item detail change request, which is when you are changing things within the same line item. Or you can request to modify your budget, which is when you need to move money from one line item to another. So let's start with the line item detail change. If you are making changes within your line item category, that would be salaries and benefits, services and supplies. Those are your line item categories. And then within those categories, you have these specific detailed lines where you're listing each specific activity, whether it's a particular position that you're paying or particular services that you're offering. Those are your detailed lines. And then, of course, you have your narrative sections in your budget. When you are doing a line item detail change, you are only dealing with that specific, all of your changes are happening within that specific line item category. So maybe you're changing a position or you need to expand your narrative. Say you had services and supplies or participant supports, but you did not clarify what those would resemble. So you wanted to do participant supports, but you didn't stipulate gift cards or hygiene kits or things like that. But when you submitted your invoice, you had all of that stuff in your invoice packet, well, you would need to do a line item so you could expand on what your narrative is, so we would know this was what you were budgeting for and this is how that money should be allocated or spent. So that's your line item request. If you need to do such a change, you need to reach out to the field rep and you need to provide some information. So you're going to need to, one, identify which line item category you want to modify: salaries and benefits, services and supplies, etc., and which detail lines within there need to also be adjusted or modified. You're going to provide a detailed explanation about the changes that you want to make and why. One of the most important things that you do when you are making changes to your project or to your budget is to maintain the story. What we need to be able to do is track what are those changes that are happening over the course of your project. So that's why those explanations are important. If audited, we need to be able to provide that documentation so that anybody that walks in and picks it up can say, oh, that's what happened. This makes good sense. So that's really what you want to keep in mind when you're thinking about, oh, I need to make this change or I need to submit this. You want to make sure that you're giving that explanation and that detail to preserve the story of how these changes came about. You'll want to describe the addition or the deletion of activities, positions, subcontractors, whatever you're doing to make those change. And again, you want to make sure that you're including the justification for why you need to add this thing. So for example, if you are changing a position, so say you had a case manager, say you had 2 case managers, but as time goes on, you realize you only need 1. And then with that position, with the second case manager, you're going to convert it to, let's say we're going to convert it to a housing navigator that's going to be paid the same amount of money. So you don't have to move any money and you don't have any changes going on. You're going to explain, one, we have changes in our salaries and benefits. We budgeted for 2 case managers. We realized that we only needed 1 to do the job effectively. So we want to eliminate 1 and we want to convert the second one into a housing navigator. And they are going to do X, Y, and Z, and their pay will stay the same. So there will be no changing of funds, right? And you'll want to explain why this is necessary, because they need to provide whatever services or, things like that. So the key thing is to make sure your explanations are clear and that they support the work that you signed up to do, and then identify if there are costs or savings and how they may be reallocated within that line. So if you want to move some money within that line, you can do that as well. So your email language would be kind of just like what I had said. So you'll email the field rep. We would like to make a line item detail change to this line item category. This is the story, what happened. We're no longer using the position. The reason we're not using it is because we got different funding for it. We want to replace that with this. The amount is the same, so there's no change within that money. There's no changing of money. So that's what makes it a line item detail change request. Once you submit that email language, you will send that to the email. You'll send that to the field rep. And once we get everything approved, once the language is right, then I'll give you a tentative approval for your request. Once I give you that tentative approval, then you will copy and paste that language into your invoice workbook and mark the line item detail change. And Adriana's going to show you what that looks like after we get finished with this part of the presentation. And then you always want to make sure that you keep your approval emails in your file for your documentation purposes as well. The budget modification. So remember, when you're moving money between line item categories, like here you have services and supplies, and then you have professional services. When you're moving money between categories, that's when you need to do a budget modification. So yes, you'll start same way. You're going to start with an email to the field rep. You're going to identify which line item category or categories in which you have savings, because typically for a budget mod, you've discovered that you've saved some money here and you want to allocate it here. So you need to tell us where you have savings, how much you have savings or how much you've saved, and why you saved that amount. Then you're going to tell us where you want to move it to, how much. So if you're breaking it down within that new line item category, you're designating a certain amount to one detail line and another amount to another detail line. You'll want to be really clear in that. And you'll also need to be really clear on your reason for moving the funds. Now, this is really a simplified model. And as I've been doing these budget mods, we know that they can be really complex. So just know that if you are trying to prepare a budget modification or a line item detail change, I, as your field rep, will be working really closely with you to make sure that your language is correct and that everything is making sense and that we're able to get that submitted properly. So again, you will identify where you have savings. You'll provide your detailed justification for the savings, including how it impacts or support your project goals and outcomes. You're going to tell us where you want that savings to go, again, including justification for the change and how it supports your project goals and outcomes. And then you'll submit your email to the field rep using the verbiage that I will show you now. So the way we like to receive your budget modification, the language we like to see is we have realized a savings of X amount of dollars in the line item category blank because of, and that's your justification reason. We would like to move the amount of X amount of dollars in savings to blank line item category because, and that's your justification. So you want to be sure that you capture, you want to be sure to capture that specific detail and communicate that as best you can. And again, I've been working with some pretty complicated budget mods these last couple of months, so I do know that it's easier said than done. But again, we are here to support you in that process and we will not steer you wrong. So just definitely make sure that the most important thing you do with your budget modification or your line item changes is preserve the story. You want to preserve the story of how you started, what you proposed, and what those changes are, so that in the event of an audit, there is continuity in how things have moved. People need to be able to say, oh, that makes sense. I see what happened. If we can't do that, then we run into problems long term. So your sample language again is here. We have realized the savings of blank for this position in this line item. And then you have your reason because we've been able to conduct the program without that particular staff and want to eliminate that position. We want to move that money to this line item for this purpose, to cover emergency housing costs, to provide immediate shelter, and that's how it impacts your grant project or your goals or objectives. So you want to make sure that you're hitting all of those key points when you do your email. The other thing that I'll add in is when you are submitting your email, especially if you're doing the stuff in salaries and benefits, it is going to be important that you include your calculations because when the analyst, once it's approved and the analyst make the adjustments and load it into the budget narrative so that those changes again are preserved in perpetuity, you will need to be able to update the budget narrative with those new calculations. They'll need to know If we're adding a position, what's the FTE, what's the salary, what's the benefit amount? All of that stuff needs to be outlined in your budget modification. And the same for when you're making changes. So we're changing this position from 0.5 FTE at this. We're changing it to 0.2 FTE at this. So you need to be able to lay all of that out so that the analysts can have that information when they're making the updates to your budget as well. And again, it allows us to maintain and to preserve the story of how your budget has evolved and changed throughout the life of the project. And then once you get your email approval, you'll have a tentative approval, and then you'll be given instructions on how to submit it into the workbook. And again, that is the part that Adriana will be sharing with you on how to put it into the workbook. Are there any questions on budget modifications? Did I answer those couple of questions that were out there? Elsa, I know that was yours.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Are there any other questions on budget modifications that we need to
Yes,
answer?
this is Jennifer Walker.
Yes.
On the budget modifications, if you move monies out of, like, say, one category, line item 1, and you have several changes in line item 1, but it doesn't balance. So you have to move it to another line item, but you may have to separate it. It may be 2 sources that calculates to the amount that you need in another line item.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you balance it the way that you described it? It's like applying it to that particular line item, the whole amount goes here, and it may not be an exact amount.
Yes. Good question. Thank you. It is a very delicate balance, and it is not easy to achieve. One of the things that we will sometimes do is sometimes we will have to merge the line item and the budget modification together. Sometimes we'll have to do a line item justification and then a budget modification. So really that'll be a case by case, first of all. Excuse me. Second of all, the one thing that I didn't say, and I think this might get to the heart of your question, Jennifer, oftentimes when you guys are putting together your budget mods, what we see or what I've seen is you'll want to allocate change by change. So you'll want to take your case manager savings and apply it to services and supplies, and then you'll want to take your housing manager or housing navigator savings and apply it to other for travel or mileage. That actually makes things more complicated. So what we want you to do is identify your savings in that total line item category. If there are things that need to be allocated or reallocated within that line item, do that first, spend that money in there first, and then move out whatever is left. Or if we need to move money in to finish that out, then we'll do that. So you want to keep your category savings grouped together as much as possible, and then we'll move out extra or we'll move in deficits to balance them out. Did that help? Did that answer your question, Jennifer?
Yes, it did.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions on budget modifications? Hearing none. Adriana, back to you.
Thank you, Tanya.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you guys should be able to see the budget modifications again. So now that Tanya has provided you guys with the guidance on how to initiate a modification request, I'm going to go ahead and move forward with how to complete the modification form and the process. Once the field representative approves your request, the authorized financial officer may submit the budget modification form. And I would actually change that word from may to should submit the budget modification form in order for this process to take place. Here's the budget modification form that you guys will be completing. You guys will go ahead and select whether this form is being utilized for a line item change or a budget modification. You may only use one of these at a time when you guys are doing the form. So if you guys have identified that you guys are doing the budget modification, you guys will select budget modification, enter the modification request number, if this is your first, or what number modification this is to your budget. The effective invoice. So the effective invoice is the invoice that's going to be impacted by this budget modification. Here in this slide, you're going to see the changes area here. This is only to be entered when you are doing a budget modification, as Tanya explained, if you are moving funds from one line item to another. If you're doing a line item change, you do not need to do anything here. In this section, you're going to enter the amounts that are being added or deducted from each line item. At the end, this should be here totaling down to 0 once you have completed all the movements of your funds. Here we have the justification section. In the justification section, we are requesting that you go ahead and copy and paste the budget modification language that was approved by your field rep for your modification. If once you have copied and pasted that information, you are not able to scroll down, but you know the information is within the cell, once we receive the form, we will go ahead and extend the cell here. Okay, now that you have gone ahead and submitted the type of modification that you're doing, whether it's a line item or a budget modification, you have entered the effective invoice number, the modification request number, and copied and pasted the approved language. We will move on to the how to approve and certify the budget modifications. In the person preparing the report section here, the individual who prepares the budget modification will provide their contact information and the date it was prepared and forward the Excel workbook to the authorized financial officer for review and approval. The authorized financial officer will must review each line item and category and the justification, then approve the budget modification by providing their contact information and the date of approval, certify, and submit their budget modification. Once the budget modification is certified by using the submit option, do not forget that the authorized financial officer will go ahead and receive a confirmation email. Again, another reminder, the authorized financial officer cannot be the project director or the individual preparing the budget modification. If the submit option is not accessible, the authorized financial officer will email the Excel workbook to the adult reentry email. Again, we are reminding you to go ahead and utilize the subject line to indicate the grantee name, the budget modification number, and your contract number. And another reminder, the authorized financial officer is the only authorized individual to submit a budget modification request to the BSEC. We encourage you that if you do have to submit your request via email, to attach the approval email to this request here. Once the field representative reviews and approves the budget modification, the updated Excel workbook will be emailed to the authorized financial officer and the individual who prepared the report, as well as posted to the BSEC website. Do we have any questions regarding the budget modification or line item form or process?
I don't see anything in the chat. I did want to make sure I threw out there too. I know you had pointed it out when they submit, but when you're doing your modification request to the field rep, also make sure that you include which invoice it is impacting. So not only do you want to identify budget mod number, but you also want to let us know which invoice it would be impacting. Is this effective invoice 2, effective invoice 3, effective invoice 14? So you do want to make sure that you're clear there as well. So I just wanted to add that piece also.
This is Jennifer again.
Yes, ma'am.
Adriana, can you go back to the last screen?
Of course.
Yes, and you have invoice template attached to the modification. So what is that?
Okay. That is your invoice workbook, which is the one that has the budget modification form. So you're not necessarily sending in the form. It's always going to be the invoice workbook that contains the form that you guys are submitting. So that's why we constantly remind you guys to do the subject line and let us know what is it that we're looking at within that invoice workbook. In this case, we're going to be looking at your budget modification form. Does that make sense?
I don't see the budget modification attachment.
No, this template here is the invoice workbook. And remember how within this workbook, you will find the budget modification form that you're going to be completing.
Okay.
And so that's why here on the email subject line, we know that the invoice workbook is being submitted to go ahead and process a budget modification. So when we open this book, we're going to go to your budget modification tab and see all the information that you have entered there for your request.
Okay.
Are we lost?
Well, the word invoice,
Oh,
it's making me think that that's all that it represents.
Okay. It's actually just the invoice workbook.
Okay.
So I think maybe, if we just identify it as a workbook, we can just assume that all the tabs are within that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. I'm going to go ahead and move on over to advance payment. Generally, this is what your process will look like for the advance payment request process. You're going to have to ensure that the percent of total disbursed funds expended to date has reached 80%. All prior invoices and desk reviews must be completed and approved. Then you can submit the advance payment request. So here, when we're saying that all prior invoices and desk reviews must be completed and approved, the 80% must be on funds that were already approved for reimbursement. So basically, if you know that your sixth quarter or fifth quarter invoice is going to get you through the 80%, we need to have confirmed that by approving the invoice and the expenditures that are submitted within that invoice. So once you have gone ahead and confirmed that information, you will go ahead and locate your advance payment form that is in your workbook. The financial invoices track the advance payment disbursements here and the total disbursed funds expended to date. Once the grantee's approved expenditures has reached the 80% of the total disbursed funds, an advance payment invoice may be submitted. Again, here's the form that is within your workbook. In the person preparing report section, the individual who prepares the advance payment will provide their contact information and the date it was approved. This will be done once you guys have entered in the effective invoice number. They will go ahead and complete this part with their information, date it, and then the authorized financial officer will go ahead and complete their portion. Then approve it by providing their the contact information, the date, and then provide a original signature. So this form will have to be printed and signed by the authorized financial officer. As you can see here, part of the pre-populated information is giving you what it is your second advance total will be. Once the form is completed, the authorized financial officer shall email a scanned PDF copy of the signed advance payment invoice and the Excel invoice workbook to the adult reentry email. Again, we are reminding you to do the subject line with the grantee name, the advance payment invoice request number, and your contract number. The authorized financial officer is the only person who is authorized to submit an advance payment invoice to the BSCC. Okay, that was it for advance payment. This concludes the fiscal responsibilities presentation. Do we have any questions pertaining to invoices, desk reviews, advance payments, modifications? Okay, I
Kim
do
just asked a question. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I just wanted to remind you guys again, the invoice workbook is compiled of all the forms that you guys will be needing throughout your grant. So yes, sometimes we will just call it the invoice workbook, but it is the one workbook that has all of the forms that you will be utilizing throughout your grant.
Thank you. Kim put a question in the chat. Is there a time when an agency can switch to reimbursement requests as opposed to advance payments each time? The answer to that, Kim, is talk to me and we can see what we can do, if that's what you're interested in doing. Any other questions on your fiscal responsibilities? Invoicing, desk reviews, advance payments, budget mods? All right, we're counting on you guys to do them right, do them good.
Tanya, can I jump in here, or Tanya and Adriana, and maybe just also ask the question for the group? Since we mentioned that we are accepting electronic signatures because of COVID, will we be doing the same thing for the advance payment signature in that PDF form?
Are you asking me?
I know the answer. I just want to ask it for maybe the rest of the group, because we addressed the fact for the other supporting documentations that we're accepting electronic signatures. So are we doing the same for the advance payment as well?
Okay. My response to that is that we are requesting and basically requesting that for the most part, they are wet signatures that are being provided. But when it comes to their advance payment, I would have to say that they would have to reach out to us to kind of let us know that there is just really no way that they can provide us that wet signature and scan that form into us. We definitely, from my point of view, I definitely don't want to hold back an advance payment request because of a participant having no access to scanning. So I think it would have to be addressed on a case by case, but we do request that it would be a wet signature when possible. Tanya?
I'd agree. I know that's the way we've been doing it so far. We have been having our current grantees print, wet sign, and then scan it back. If that's something that we need to look at as a team, we can certainly do that. And then if we do make any changes, we'll just get that out to you guys with regards to if we'll just take a digital on the advance payment, or if we'll continue to require the wet signature and scan. But as of now, that is the way we've been doing it. So we can leave that as the process on record for now. And then if we decide as a team later that we are going to convert to accepting all digital for everything, then we'll make that announcement to you guys, either via an email or we'll discuss it at our next project director calls. Thank you, Veronica. Good point. Anything else? All right. Thank you, Adriana.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we will hear from our final grantee presentation for the day, for the orientation period. Who's up? Who's up? Who's up? Time for change. Woo, woo. All right, Miss Kim, take it away.
Now my screen then got stuck. You see how you did me? I can't see nothing.
We can see you.
Okay, well, great. Hello there, how y'all doing? My name is Kim Carter, and I am the founder of Time for Change Foundation. And for the purpose of this project, I will be the program manager or project director. I would like to also talk about my team that's on the call right now. We have Vanessa Perez. She's our executive director. She's located in Southern California. I'm located here in Northern California. We also have David Howe. He's going to be our fiscal manager for the purpose of this project. He's in SoCal, and in office with him, we also have Katrina Longmire. She's going to be the day-to-day fiscal contact for this project. And we also have Aisha. Shout out to Aisha. Whoa, whoa. She's up here in the Bay Area with me. She is the housing navigator. On this call, we may have our program manager for all of our programs, which is Amelia Henderson, and she will be directly supervising our program assistant, which is not on this call right now. And as far as who we are, Time for Change Foundation was founded in 2002, particularly for women coming home from incarceration, wanting to change or wanting to recreate their life. So when I was inspired, and motivated to start the organization, I really based it on what happened with me of the continuous recycling in and out, but I never had a place to come home to change that. And so therein lies the first structure we have, which is our first home called Time for Change, and we house 6 women. Well, since then, we've expanded to 17 locations. We have 3 emergency shelters. We have 13 permanent supportive housing units. And in 2012, because I was just really irritated with the housing authority taking 8 years for people to get on the list in order to get housing, I became an affordable housing developer and started building my own affordable housing. So we're an award-winning organization. We were in the prison with offices prior to the COVID. We've done a couple of scientific projects with women coming from incarceration who have mental health and dual diagnosis. And we have a 0 recidivism rate out of like 7 years. We operate under a SAMHSA grant that we've been doing. And we're just really excited to be a part of this BSCC. We also have a lot of our clients have gone on and become advocates. They are out making laws. We were one of the proponents of Prop 47. We were champions for and actually co-sponsors of AB 1008, which actually removed the felony questions off of all job applications. So we've been on both sides fighting for change and being a part of that change. That's pretty much it. What
about your project? What are you going to be doing with the ARG?
Oh, duh. This is what happened when you're screen free. I can't see no faces right now after all this time. What we're going to be doing, we're going to be doing a rental assistance program. And we've been doing rental assistance for like maybe 12 years now. So we're not new to actually helping people overcome barriers to housing. And we've been doing housing first when we first created the Housing First model with our permanent supportive housing program. So we're going to be providing rental assistance in 4 different methods, right? One of the methods is going to be direct first month rent and security deposit for people who have come home from California State Prison. The second is going to be a family stipend if they're living with a family member who can use the subsidy. The family member will get the subsidy. The third is going to be paying for like maybe a SLE or some other kind of shared housing. And the fourth is going to be anybody who's actually in one of our own housing programs will get a shelter voucher amount. So we'll be providing those 4 types of assistance in both Northern California and Southern California.
Awesome. That's good. I'm glad to hear about it, and I can't wait to see you guys start kicking off and seeing all the work that you'll be able to do. And it's impressive that you're going to be throughout the state. So good luck, good luck, good luck, good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Kim. All right. So the next section is we're going to talk a little bit about data collection. This part should be pretty quick. We'll talk about how to collect certain data for race and ethnicity, some tips and suggestions we'll have for you, and then Danielle will talk to you about your progress reports. So the first thing to remember is you are required to collect some data around race and ethnicity. There are a few government code sections that are related to the collection of that data that the BSCC And by extension, the projects it funds, which would include you guys, we are required to follow these government codes. We'll briefly review some of these so that you can keep them in mind when you're developing your data collection instruments in order to collect your demographic data for your project participants. This first code is Government Code 8310.5. This section mandates that the collection of data must include and report each major Asian group, including but not limited to Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, Korean, Vietnamese, Asian Indian, Laotian, and Cambodian. So those have to be outlined specifically, and also each major Pacific Islander group, including but not limited to Hawaiian, Guamanian, and Samoan. This code section was made effective January 1st of 2012. Therefore, this level of categorization is required for your quarterly progress report data, and it has been laid out in your quarterly progress report as such. We do encourage that you have your own process of collecting this data so that when you transfer it into your progress report, you'll have it easily accessible to you. The next code, government code, is Government Code 8310.9. And this second code requires the reporting of individuals who identify with more than one ethnicity or race. Basically, it requires that individuals have the option to select more than one race or ethnic designation, and that the multiple designations are represented in any tabulated or reported race and ethnicity data. So you want to make sure that you have a space for them to choose more than one if they are multi-ethnic, multiracial, and you want to make sure that you're able to report that information out to us as well, or you want to be able to report it generally speaking. This code section will be effective January 1, 2022. So that will be required midstream in your grant. You'll be well underway in your process. However, we do encourage, since you do know that this will be a requirement, we do encourage you to begin collecting that data as soon or as early as you possibly can. Since this effective date falls in the middle of the grant cycle, this level of disaggregation is expected, and it should also be reflected in the quarterly progress reports. And this data is important because it helps us honor the heritage of participants by not forcing them to report in only one race or ethnic category. Okay, this here is a sample I'll call it a sample. It's a form that you can use. We do have it available. It will be included in your virtual binder as an attachment if you want to use this form. If you need a form to use to collect race and ethnicity data, you are more than welcome to use it. You can use this form. It is optional. It is not required. It is a tool or a resource that we developed in case you needed access to something. This form is to be completed once per project participant. So if you have a participant who is involved with multiple providers for your project, they only need to complete this form one time. There is more information on the collection of race and ethnicity data available on our website under the BSCC's recommendations for collection and reporting of juvenile race and ethnicity data, which is labeled AB 1998. So you can find that on the website. So that is again, it's a sample form. If you need one to collect this data, it will be required in the progress report. So you will be needing to track this information. Just make sure if you don't have a form already, make sure you include it. You may want to look at this form if you do have one to make sure you are in line with the government reporting requirements. Then we have a couple of tips that you can use. to be able to, as you're collecting your data, as you are developing your forms or whatever, these pages will be available as well in your virtual handout. In your virtual binder. We'll have these, it's 2 pages of data collection tips. And again, they're just tips. None of this is any level of a requirement. This is just information we want to share with you, so that as you are developing your projects and wanting to track the data, especially as you look at introducing or utilizing evidence-based information, evidence-informed practices, a lot of how we get the evidence is through data and tracking. So you'll want to make sure that you have good collection instruments. You want to make sure that your staff are trained in the collection of the data and the tools that you're using. You'll want to create a dictionary to make sure people have a shared understanding. So again, these are just some tips of how you'll want to collect and utilize the data. Document your data collection procedures, implement validation checks when possible. A lot of that go back to fidelity and making sure that you're following your processes and procedures, making sure your data is collected in a consistent manner. All of these things are just tips for you to take with you and to implement as you see fit and as they are useful and beneficial for you in managing your project. Any questions on data collection before I pass it off to Danielle for progress reports?
I have this is Bernice with Arsola. I do.
Yes, ma'am.
The virtual binder, has that been completed yet?
No, that will probably be posted. I'm shooting for next week. We'll have that up for you. And once we have that together, I will send out an email that tells you that it's available and where to find the resource on our website.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions before Danielle takes you into progress reports? All right, Danielle.
Okay, let me start sharing my screen here. Make sure I pick the right one. Okay. Okay, can everybody see my screen right here?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to do an overview of the progress reporting section. Move slides. So this is just some examples of what the progress report will look like. So the first part is a Word document. You'll see right here that section 1 is basic, just general information regarding the project. Things such as your contract, grant award number, information about who's filling out this progress report. Then it moves on to just a general project overview. It's more information about the projects in regards to things such as your award amount, how much your program has claimed in invoices to date. And this is an accumulative amount. So make sure that when you are moving on to your quarterly progress report for the second quarter and then forward, that you do claim this as a total amount. So section 3, it is grantee identified goals and objectives. So these goals will match the narrative that you created for your proposal, and to ensure that you are meeting grant requirements that you previously laid out into your narrative. It is very important that you do make sure that these goals match. I think Tanya stated it yesterday that if you do see that your goals may need some changing, that it's really important that you do reach out to your field rep. And substantive changes that will affect your program goals and needs, they should be circumstances that are beyond your control. And these need to be submitted to the BSCC by your program director. We will need to, discuss these changes that may occur with our executive team and possibly our legal counsel to ensure that you are meeting those goal requirements and are in compliance with your grant. It's just very important to make sure that you are, describing the process that you are going to meet these goals with, what point in that process you're at, maybe any challenges toward meeting that goal, to make sure that we don't at the end of the grant realize that the goals completely have shifted. Some examples that we brought up yesterday, I know we were talking in our breakout rooms about, just different things that have happened because of COVID. So that might be, one idea for you to consider when you are speaking and collecting this data about where you are at with your goals. Section 4 moves on to staffing and or volunteers. This just outlines where your program currently is at with your staffing process, what potential staffing needs that you might still be encountering. This is where you'll also tell us about any staffing changes and how you do plan on filling any vacancies. And then it also has you talking about if there is any plans you see in the foreseeable future of any salary savings due to maybe reallocations or modifications of roles and positions. Next is the narrative section, section 5. This is where you will explain where your program is on track in relation to the work plan and project narrative in your proposal. You can also mention any activities that you may be hosting, such as down here in subsection C, part 2. These may change, the activities may change because as we all know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. So who knows, the next time we might be doing something that's not virtual. However, whenever you need any assistance from BSCC and our staff, or you just feel that either the training, the community event, that it would benefit from the assistance of BSCC, just reach out to us. I think Tanya also spoke with this yesterday. Just we're always here to help out and want to give as many resources as possible to these programs. Next, so this is just pointing out that this is only the first portion of the progress report. So there's actually two portions or two parts that make up the entire progress report process. The first, like I just went over, is a Word document. The second being an Excel file. So we'll move on and show what that looks like. So here's the Excel file. This portion is more in reference to data collection and its quantitative data versus where the Word document is more qualitative information. Section 6 talks about the numbers of the participants in your program. It's really important to look and read each subsection to see if it's for what quarter you are reporting on, if it's a cumulative number or if it's just for that reporting quarter or the previous quarter. Section 7 also goes into demographics, which Tanya just spoke about, which is another reason why it is important to maintain records of different demographics of race and ethnicity of these participants. As I'll move on, not only does it show that you do want to see the age of all the participants, but then it does ask about gender, and then it asks about their ethnicity. Then it moves into section 8, identification, outreach, and enrollment process. So this will just lay out points of entry for the participants, as well as the length of time between release and them starting the program. I know there were some questions about that yesterday. And then it does ask if there were any participants that you were in contact with pre-release, which was another thing I think we spoke a little bit about. So section 9 moves on to participant services and activities. This first section lays out housing services and how many participants are in each type of program that you may have. And lastly, this is the second portion to that, and it just lays out other receiving services and how many participants are utilizing these services during that reporting quarter. So that is the entirety of what the progress report will look like. How you will find it is you will go to the BSCC website, which is down here. This is what our homepage looks like. You can see the grant tabs right here. Hitting that will take us to the CPGP page. When you get to the CPGP page, scroll down towards the bottom. It's almost all the way to the bottom. And on the right-hand side, you will see the Grantee Progress Reports tab. So you'll click on that. Then you'll want to hit this little drop down here, and you will find your program and see how I said there's part 1 and 2. You'll want to download both of those. And let me see if I could bring it up for you. I'll walk you through it really fast so it's not just pictures of how to get there. So here's BSDC website. Click on grants. Sorry, my internet's obviously slow. We scroll all the way down and we will see Grantee Progress Reports here. It will open a new window. If it wants to open. There we go. And you can find right here the little drop down that I was talking about. And lastly, these are some dates to not forget. These are your progress reporting periods on this side, and then this is when the information regarding those progress reports are due. We do understand this first date of November 16th has already passed and the February 15th is approaching. Obviously, we didn't have the progress reports up, didn't go over them with you, so we're not expecting, or you're not in trouble for not turning them in yet. Just as soon as you get all the documentation together that you do need, we just ask you to submit that as soon as you have it. And that concludes the progress report section. Are there any questions?
I don't see any in the chat, but I do want to add one correction. Remember, Danielle, when we talked about progress reports on Monday, we told them that they would just do one report on the 15th or for February. Not to, we're not asking them to make it up.
You just jogged my memory on that. Yeah, so you did say that. So yes, quarter 1 and quarter 2 are now going together February 15th. So sorry about that one.
No,
don't want to confuse anybody.
Not a problem. Thank you. Any questions? This is actually our last section, and we're ready to wrap up. Are there any final questions that you have about anything that we've covered over the 3 days? Anything that you just need to make sure that you ask? Any comments you want to share? Thoughts, issues, concerns you need to address? Anything we can do for you today that you need to make sure that you share with us? Now's your time. Floor is open. Don't all speak at once. Okay. I guess that means there are no questions. That means, team, we did a good job. We were clear. We were thorough. They understood everything we put out there because they have no questions. I'm impressed. Good job, team. and oh, go ahead, Veronica.
Just a quick question, just to clarify on the progress reports. I know you said that we're going to combine them, but you still need them to require or send in 2 progress reports just simultaneously on the same due date for February, correct?
I was asking them to just do one and report all of the information that they need to. Do you need them to have 2?
It should be, and we can discuss this offline and then send out a follow-up email, only because we have the 2 sections on their progress report where they need to select each box because they're reporting out on that specific reporting period.
Gotcha. Cool. We can clarify that one for you in an email, folks. All right. Are there any other questions? Anything else that you need to cover? If not, I want to thank you all for your time, your participation, your attention, allowing me to test my breakout room skills, which today wasn't so great, but we tried. And thank you so much for being a part of the Adult Reentry Grant Project. And I am excited to watch you guys blossom with your projects and see all the good work that you're able to do and the way you're able to impact your communities. Thank you so much and have a fantastic rest of your week and a happy holiday season. We'll see you in January for project director calls.
Great job, BSCC.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bessie,